a builder. You were designed to build. Maybe it's a business, maybe it's a school, maybe it's a nonprofit, it could be a church, it could be a hospital, it could be your family. I don't know, but I do know that you and I were put here to create. And some of us start with the vision that we are those leaders. We have this thing put on our heart. And then others join the vision with us, that they join in. They're builders also, but they join into that thing that we started. But either way, we are all building something. You have a purpose and a unique and incredible design, a design that when activated brings joy and even wholeness to the people in the world around you. But here is the whole story. Here's the truth. What you build will rise or fall with whole people and the whole leaders who build with you. Not just their performance, but their wholeness. Because broken leaders build broken cultures, and whole leaders build trust that outlives them. And developing whole leaders is not optional. It doesn't mean that their brokenness won't be there, because it always will be. But we can intentionally move people toward wholeness, a more complete version of themselves that is true. And it means excavating their purpose with them, deepening their competence, like even inviting them to learn from experience and supporting them through challenges, and even giving them the skills to build other leaders. That's how the building lasts. And as you build, you will begin to execute and see your vision come to life. You'll begin to set up operational systems based on a strategy that you believe can work. And you'll need leaders. You'll need people who will see those around you more clearly and lead the vision with you. They will need to be those who will galvanize others with you, hold others accountable, and move your vision into a reality. And your people will establish patterns, intentional or not. And those patterns will become what is called culture. And the lifeblood of culture will be trust. But too often we treat trust like a vapor, like oxygen. We know we can't live without it, but when we reach out to grab it, it disappears in our hands. But try building without it and watch how fast things suffocate. A blueprint without trust is just paper. Trust is what makes performance, well-being, and joy substantive, something real. And every builder eventually hits the same wall. You can't scale operations faster than you can scale trust. And at scale, leadership becomes an act of faith. Wow. I mean, you're leading people you may never see, but they will feel your trust or your neglect. And that is why I wrote the book, Whole Leaders, Wild Trust: The Courageous Path to Personal, Relational, and Organizational Change. Coming February 10th. This is a manifesto for building trust that lasts. It's not platitudes, it's not hype, and I don't hold back on the formula, because I hate that, quite honestly. I gave you the whole thing, the how-to, the roadmap for investing in people, for building trust, for developing whole leaders, and for leading in a broken world. And it's why today's guest matters so much to me. If you cut him, he bleeds practical wisdom and a kind of gritty hope that makes people want to get better together. He has quite literally redefined how we see teams, how we see leadership, and how we see trust itself. And his work has shaped millions, and it will shape you today. Sabbath, will you introduce this wild leader to us, who is our guest?
And before I do, welcome to the Wild Conversation, where human being and human doing converge, reshaping the world of leadership, culture, and performance. Today, we get to have a wild conversation with Pat Lencioni, co-founder of the Table Group and the pioneer who turned organizational health into a movement. He's the author of 13 books with 9 million plus copies sold in 30 plus languages, and he's still rewriting the playbook on teams and leadership. As president of the Table Group, Pat spends his time speaking, writing, and rolling up his sleeves with executive teams. After more than 20 years, the 5 dysfunctions of a team is still a fixture on national bestseller lists because it works on Monday morning, not just in theory. His latest 6 Types of Working Genius helps leaders name the spark that makes them builders. He also hosts the hit podcast At the Table with Patrick Lencioni. Pat, thank you for being with us today.
It truly is, at Chick-fil-A, they said it's my pleasure, but it is my total pleasure to be here. This is a party. This is fun. I just can't imagine how we're going to contain this to a certain time frame. We could probably talk for the next 2 days. So
Indeed, we could. As we jump into our conversation today, we're going to play a quick round of wild cards. So we have a deck of 50 cards, each with a developmental question on it. I just pulled 10, and I don't know what the questions are. So we're just going to go around in a circle and choose a number between 1 and 10. And I'll pull the card and we'll answer a different question, each of us. I'll go first. Pat, you can go next. Rob will round us out. Answer from your gut. You can answer in one word, or if a story comes to mind, you're welcome.
I love it.
To tell it. All right. I will pick number 3.
I was going to pick 3.
Oh, okay. I'm going to.
No.
Okay,
You pick 3.
I won't. I'll pick number 5. I can adjust. Okay. What was a humbling experience that made you stronger? I'm going to say motherhood. I know this is a big answer. However, I have never learned so much about myself than when a mini version of me that I've been trying to grow out of is staring me right in the face, telling me all the things about myself that I was trying to get better at. So motherhood humbles me. It continues to humble me every day, and at the same time is making me stronger.
That's great.
Yeah. All right, Pat. You want number 3 still?
3.
Okay. Number 3 is, what is the unique contribution you bring to every team? I promise I did not stack this question.
I like that. I think it's that I see things simply, and I have a real heart for people who don't understand things. I didn't grow up very sophisticated. And so when I'm in a room and somebody says something, I'm like, I wonder if I understand it, I think maybe there's other people that don't. Or if I don't understand it, I'll be the one to ask. So mine is, I think what I bring to teams is permission to ask questions and to reduce things down to simple terms. So I think that's generally what I do.
That's so good. So good and so true. I'll go number 8 because it looks like a snowman.
All right. Number 8 is, are you becoming more introverted or extroverted with age?
I would say more selectively introverted. I need a lot of time to refresh, especially people make fun of me for this. After 4 p.m., Pat, is like I get a little bit more introverted in the late afternoon, evening. And so, yeah, probably slightly more introverted, but I'm actually enjoying being around people I enjoy even more. So that's kind of interesting. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It happens. Sabbath, thank you. Thank you for that.
I love that
out there. Yeah, I always, when I get asked those questions, Pat, I'm always like, who wrote these questions? Oh, wait, I had a hand in those. So, so I'm so appreciate this conversation and your friendship and, getting to know you. But I want to start off with something a little bit. Let's get into the very, very shallow end before we get into the deep end.
All right.
And so I was going to start off with something that's not that important, but I think, sometimes important, is that I have some pet peeves, and some of these are business speak pet peeves. And I'd love to know one of your pet peeves, if you can think of one. And here's one of mine, Pat, is I like know-a-lots, but I do not like know-it-alls. And there's a thing in business that some of my close friends that I make fun of because they'll say it too. And it's when you hear phrases like this, when people will say, "Remember, Rob." And it's like they're assuming I wasn't remembering, or they'll say, "You got to understand that." And then one of my favorites is this one, is like, "Think about it." And I'm always like, so if I wasn't, and then here's the last one, here's the big one, Pat, that's in that same category is, and you hear this all the time from senior leaders, is, "Look." Like they talk to each other this way, and it's just natural. And it's
so true.
So that's mine. What's one of yours? Do you have one?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Because as you said, so here's like a pet peeve because of my age, and my kids will tell you this, when I'm watching a movie with somebody or doing something together and they get on their phone. And that's just my age. I'm like, hey, we're doing this together. And they're like, what? I got other things, and they're like, I'm multitasking. It's like, well, this is a collective activity. And so that's just an age thing. It drives me crazy, generationally.
That
But,
is so funny. Yeah.
and they're like, what's your problem? But,
Yeah. Yeah.
different things. I think we know our pet peeves because we're kind of drawn to witness them. It's like, this is terrible, but it's like you go by a car accident, you have to look. You know what I
Yes.
mean? And I
Yes.
think that I realize this when people answer questions using word salad because they don't know the answer, and so they're using words and phrases that don't mean anything.
Yeah.
It drives me crazy because I'm like, am I supposed to nod and smile at that? Because
Yeah.
that doesn't make any sense to me. And it's kind of like, and you work in the corporate world and you go to meetings and people use words and they say things and you're like, okay, do you know what you just said? And they're like, no, not really. So it's when people try to get away with that and other people in the meeting just nod and smile, it kind of drives me crazy.
Well, I think it's the what the psychologists call may get this wrong, the Bader Meinhof. It's like if you buy a Volkswagen, what do you see all over the road? You see Volkswagens, so it's like then it's worse because you're peeved. Now you're just looking for it everywhere.
Yeah,
It gets
totally.
worse. I gotta say something about the texting, the be on phones thing that I'm going to date both of us, but I realized this the other day. I was talking to my sons and they were trying to explain to me the way they text because I'll say, hey, did you talk to so and so? And they'll say yes. And I'm like, and they actually didn't. They texted with them.
Oh,
So I'm taking it literally. You know what they're doing now? And you may know this, Pat. You may be cooler than me on this, but like my sons who are in their early 20s, they carry on multiple text threads with the same person. Like they literally will have 10 threads of replies. I can barely keep up with one. I'm just like saying, okay, this is really happening. It's really happening in our world.
that's so interesting. It's a different way of looking at communication because I am so annoying. One, I have fat fingers and I also don't see as well as I used to. So the idea of texting is like always hard for me. And I'm a caller.
Yeah.
I call
You
and
call.
I'd say, hey, you don't have to pick up. Well, why don't you just text me? And it's like, because I really just want to hear your voice and
Yeah.
see where it
Yeah.
goes. And
Yeah.
so
Well,
it is very generational, very
it is very
generational.
generational. And we're continuing to learn. So I told you
Yeah.
we'd start off in the shallow end, but tell us, Pat, what is going on in the life and mission of Pat Lencioni today? Like, what are you learning about leadership and organizational health today that you cannot help but be excited or challenged by?
I think this is why this conversation is so interesting to me and so exciting is that I'm actually feeling like all the things that you write and talk about is where I'm going. Because for years I've talked about teams and organizations and all these other things because of my background, but I'm really interested in the individual now and
Huh.
how their background and their wounds and their different way they're wired impacts how they live and how they lead. So I'm really and I'm doing this because of myself. I'm coming to learn more and more every day about myself that I didn't either understand or was probably like trying to avoid. And
Yeah.
so I'm really fascinated with why leaders and people in general do what they do and if they're aware of it. Sometimes I think we actually lead and live out of our woundedness and we
Yeah.
think it's a superpower.
Yeah.
For years I've been doing things a certain way and it's served me well in many ways in the world, but the motivation I had was not a good one. It was like out of fear. And
Yeah.
I'm learning like how do I live out of love and peace rather than fear?
Building trust in your business starts with being able to measure it so that you can create a pathway for change. Our Wild Trust Index measures the drivers of trust at the personal, team, and organizational levels. We are building the largest database on the drivers of trust inside of organizations. This survey will inform growth imperatives and the necessary organizational change needed to fuel that growth. For more information, visit wildleaders.org, click on the Wild Trust platform, and get started with the Wild Trust Index today.
I happen to be one of those people that in leading out of fear or living out of fear, I was successful, but it wasn't
Huh.
always in peace and safety. So
You know, it's so, and I want to dig into this right away. If we had a guest on named Tom Nelson, and Tom is a leader in the whole faith and workspace, and because he talks a lot about Sunday to Monday, like translating these things deeper within us into what we do on Monday, you know, at work,
interesting.
in these places.
Sunday to Monday. I like that.
And I realized, Pat, that this is what I'm fascinated by what you just said about your own journey and about me is that I realized, and I told him, I said, Tom, you just like opened my eyes to this reality. Is I spent most of my career in Monday to Sunday. Does that like
Yes.
I was called to the marketplace, and then I see this kind of this connection. I'm trying to get back to the soul. And what you just mentioned that is so important, and I want to hear more about this journey for you, is that I have had this just this obsessive way of approaching things regarding leaders. I've even said in the past I don't care about leadership. And I do care about it. I do care about it, but I care so deeply about leaders. And I think I've told you some of my background story, you know, in our
Yeah.
past conversations. And so I started there, and then I moved into, I always knew the organization was there. Like you know what I mean? I can't help but do that. But more recently, that connective tissue between teams and organization has grown out of my focus on the one. We even talked,
Interesting.
and so I'd love to hear your journey.
I'm going the other direction.
I want to know that journey. Like how is that occurring in you?
Well, I think I got into this field accidentally. What's interesting is I actually went to Claremont McKenna, which is a small college in Southern California, and the graduate school that was connected to it, they weren't the same institution, is where Peter Drucker taught. And
That's where I went to school, Pat.
No, you're kidding.
No, I'm not kidding. So like keep going. Sorry.
That is crazy.
Yeah.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't know who Peter Drucker was. My parents didn't go to college. This was a whole new experience for me. But I get out of college and I go to work at a management consulting firm called Bain and Company, a high-end, whatever. And so it was there that I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, but I know I liked the human side of things, but I hadn't really identified that. And I was at this company called Bain where we were supposed to be doing all this research on data and numbers and sales and cost. And I was fascinated by and distracted by the human side of everything. Okay.
Wow. Yeah.
If I could have gone back to college, I'd have probably majored in psychology or philosophy, but I did economics. So anyway, when I was there, because I was working in organizations, I started to think about and come up with theories about organizations and leadership of that at that level. And I was doing a lot of work with CEOs in my career. And so I really started with CEOs running companies.
Yeah.
And then over time, that I got more and more involved in teams and thinking about how that teams work. And then I started thinking more about individuals, and that's where the working genius comes in. And now I'm fully exploring like the whole person, because I've been doing that work on myself, and I want to help leaders take the first simple step toward that so people like you can transform their lives.
Yeah, that is so interesting. I had a chance to listen to a podcast you did recently. And what was so powerful about that for me is I was seeing, even knowing your work, I was seeing this journey of awareness, and you even know me well enough already to know that sharing in you of that development, like those of us who have expertise, like we're continuing to grow, right? And to learn in these spaces. And you talked about your own vulnerability. And you talked about the reason behind. Now, if I'm putting words that aren't quite on there, you'll show
I'll
me.
let you know.
You talked about your reason behind your own striving.
Yeah.
And I'm curious about, just to tell our listeners a little bit more about that journey.
Yeah, and I'm sure if you talk to any like athlete or CEO, politician, celebrity, many of them would tell the same story, and that is we think we're not enough because when we're young, we feel like we have to earn love and attention.
Mm-hmm.
And so we want to please our parents, we want to please our coaches, we want to please our teachers, we want to please strangers, we want to please our bosses. And we're doing it because we all want to know the love of God, but we don't know that. And so I just felt like I'm never enough. I want people to see me and to appreciate me. So I have to prove that I'm worthy of that.
Huh.
I was literally talking to a counselor today about this morning. And if you come from that place that you're not worthy of that, there's a lot of things you can do. One of them is you can strive to be great at everything you do.
Hmm.
So I felt like I had to get straight A's. I had to be good at every sport I did. I had to be great at my job. I had to eventually come up with new ideas. And I loved doing some of those things, but I had to go further. I had to just push, push, push because I felt inadequate. So
Hmm.
that inadequacy drove me to kind of go further and further and further. I mean, plenty of people are not the best athlete in the world because they got to be good enough and they said, that's enough. And
Yeah.
other people, the goats out there, are like, it's never enough.
Huh.
Which is why a lot of times the goats are people that after they retire, they don't know what to do with themselves, or they implode in their personal life because it's never enough. Well, we're not supposed to be like that.
Yeah.
Nobody's meant to be the goat.
How do you one of the things when I listened to your podcast, one of the questions that came to mind was, how do you know the difference, or what is the difference between striving, I think that's the word you used, or some form of that, and striving for the right reason? Like one thing I thought about was like, if those who have succeeded didn't have that striving, even if it was based in fear, because you talk about fear quite a bit as well, would they have succeeded? Like it begs for, and then of course it begs for a definition of success, right?
That's the thing.
Yeah. And so how do you know like what is the difference between striving and striving for maybe the right reason, or
Right.
out of the right motivations?
Right. And, and I don't know what's in everybody else's heart and their mind and their situation, but what I can say is this, like, had Michael Jordan been just a great basketball player and not the best, what did he strive for that because he was so afraid of the idea of losing that
Mm,
he pushed himself there, and that's not healthy in our lives. In other words, what is success? And
yeah.
and so often it's like success should be, I want to be as good as I'm meant to be in a healthy way. But when you feel like I've got to keep beating everyone, I've got to prove that I'm more and that I'm more and that I'm more. I mean, if that were natural and healthy, then that's fine. But for most people, it's not. When people say that guy is or that gal is a high achiever, these days what I realize is if we think of them that way, there's probably a wound that's unaddressed there.
So interesting.
And so the question is, if somebody said, well, yeah, but if I didn't have that, would I have done this? It's like, you mean, would you have done all of that? Maybe not, but would you trade some of that for peace? And most people go, yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
That
mean,
is so,
is
yeah.
Barry Sanders, and he was a football player that you know of, who he retired when he was 28 years old, and he was like the best running back of all time. And people are
Yeah.
like, why? And he might have
Yeah.
said, because that's enough, and there were other things in life, and I didn't need that to define me.
Yeah.
I think that's success more than somebody that's like, I've got to keep going because I feel like, and like Tiger Woods, God bless him. I talk to parents and they see Tiger Woods and the struggles he's had, and if I said to them, hey, would you want would you want your son or your daughter to do that? And I think most of them go, I know that's not healthy, but yeah, I'll take that risk because how cool would that be? And it's like, no, 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 it's not. It's a burden.
Yeah.
It's a burden. So we're meant to be as good as God intended us. And when we try to prove ourselves beyond that, it really hurts us and the people around us.
Yeah. So if we're going to get into the deep waters, let's go. I know that you were doing some of this work, and when we were doing research on what we described as leading in adversity, or leading under pressure, or leading in conflict, we were looking for models out there of, research around how leaders have navigated those kinds of situations, these high pressure kinds of moments. The best work, and I was introduced to this by my brother, was what's called self-differentiation. Best work that had been done was not coming out of the leadership research, it was coming out of family systems theory.
Oh, I'm
And
sure.
so we ended up creating an assessment called the Leading Under Pressure Inventory that gives a person a chance to assess, are you more of a peacekeeper or a truth speaker? And
Oh,
the deeper story in that. So it's a very accessible kind of assessment that gives you that sense, and also tells you what are your strengths under pressure that allow you to do both of those things at the same time, to be both
yes.
connected and also what we describe as convicted and clear about who you are. And I'm asking you this because I heard this also in your words now in that podcast you did, is that a lot of that work came out of what's described as family of origin. In
Yeah.
other words, that some of the, not maybe not all, but some of
Yeah.
the emotional processing going on inside of myself, of why I'm responding the way I am to different situations, is actually a lot of that comes from our family of origin. And I'm curious about your thoughts on that. Like if you, because you've mentioned that some of that comes from some of these wounds.
Yeah. And that's not touchy-feely or soft or weird or all that stuff. It's
Yeah.
just real. And it's as practical and accessible and germane to everything we do as anything else. Sometimes we dismiss it because, oh, am I going to lay on the floor and cry and all that stuff? It's like, I mean, probably not, maybe at some point, but the point here is when you first asked this question and you
Yeah.
start talking about what your brother did, I thought
Yeah.
too often we say, well, what should you do in a crisis? But the real question is, who are you? What is your identity and how do you see yourself? And you can go try to master habits that are not necessarily congruent with who you are. And yeah, that can get you by. But the real question is, are you safe in a crisis? Do you feel like your identity is in question? Do you feel like failure would threaten your very sense of wholeness? I think what I've learned as I've gotten older is if until we go and understand who we are and why we do what we do, how we act will be largely just a Band-Aid.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does. It does. And so to take a step into a part of this, and I know you've written about this. I actually quote you. I want to read a quote that's in my book from you, from your writing. But I wanted to talk about vulnerability for just a moment, if
Oh,
we
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and it's interesting because I've had a lot of conversations with different experts in the space of vulnerability, and I years ago I looked up what is the definition of vulnerability, and by definition, and I always want people to hear this. Vulnerability is defined as the openness to being hurt.
Yeah.
Like that's the literal definition. Because sometimes we talk about it like so you have something you want to say about that. Like,
Well, the word vulnerability is rooted in the Latin word for wound.
yes.
We are comfortable with our wounds and saying, I'm okay with you knowing how you could hurt me, which is so counterintuitive
So
to worldliness.
So counterintuitive. And
which is why it's the precursor to trust. Because if there is trust means I could go to somebody and say, I'm going to reveal things about myself that you could use to hurt me, and I'm going to do that willingly. That is trust. Protecting myself is not trust, there's a risk to trust.
yeah.
It's
Yeah.
saying to someone, and you and I are followers of Jesus, and it's like, he was so vulnerable that he was naked on a cross with wounds in front of all. And he's like, yeah, I'll take this for you. That's, so.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so funny going from the depth of that statement and then thinking about like on the surface, like you mentioned this, and this is, you said teamwork begins by building trust. And you mentioned this, you said the only way to do that, and this would be to build trust, is to overcome our need for, and I love it that you use this word, our need for invulnerability.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that, overcoming our need for invulnerability?
Well, it's interesting. And I haven't been asked that question in a while, and I've done a lot of research and work since then. But, being safe, and you were talking about emotional safety, psychological safety
Yeah.
before,
Yeah.
and Amy Edmondson. And
Yeah.
so we want to be safe. But sometimes when we trust somebody, we have to take the risk of saying, I trust you enough to give you my safety. And so should you do that? Should you trust a stranger who you have no information? No, that's not wise. But it's when you're in a relationship with somebody on a team at work or in your family or in some other situation where you go, I am going to build trust with you. And this is where the leader has to go first by opening myself up and being vulnerable and giving you some influence over my safety. What a profound, intimate moment that is to say, I trust you to care for me, even though I'm making it possible for you to hurt me.
Good golly. It reminds me when Amy Edmondson was on the podcast, and I mean, we just became friends very quickly as well. I've read her work, I've read her research, and I wondered because psychological safety oftentimes in our culture is overplayed as everyone should feel safe all the time. And so I was curious to ask her that question. She was like, that is not at all what I meant by psychological safety. But when it got to trust, she said something, Pat, and I want our listeners to hear this. Incredible triangulation from people who are thinking about this all the time. She said, trust is a choice. It's
Yes.
exactly what you just said, right? It's a
And we
choice.
have to be prudent in when we trust.
Yeah.
You know, Henry Cloud, a friend of mine, explained something to me in that the difference between forgiveness, which is a choice we make, reconciliation, which doesn't always come, you can forgive somebody and decide, I don't want to expose myself to them, and then trust, which is I'm going to give them myself to them fully. So oftentimes people think forgiving somebody means you're granting them trust. No, you can forgive somebody, which is an act of the will, even if you decide not to reconcile, and then certainly even if you decide not to trust them. Trust is the last stage in that, which is where you're fully giving them that opportunity, if they choose it, to hurt you. And that's a deep thing. So we use this word trust, and I know you don't do this, but people
Yeah.
can be kind of cavalier about it. It's quite an intimate thing.
Oh,
And
yeah.
you know what a lot of people say? A lot of people say, Rob, they say, well, I trust them, which means what they're really saying is I can predict their behavior. I trust that if I do this, this is how Rob will respond. That's predictive trust, if you will, like historical trust. Trust is when you say, I will make myself vulnerable to them. I will take a risk because I believe they will do what's in my best interest. And sometimes we get burned, and we have to be, and that's the thing. Do I feel safe enough to allow myself to get hurt? Which is, isn't that interesting? I
It
think
is
Amy Edmondson
very
would probably say
interesting.
you're right.
I am drawn, Pat, since the time of my dissertation, I am drawn to paradoxes.
Oh,
Anyone that knows me would see that I see this world, our world through, and I see humanity through competing tensions, like a paradox being two competing truths, both of which are true.
yes.
And it's like to try to synthesize and make the paradox go away, but to say, how do we live in this space between safe enough, to take that risk, and the sacrificial choice necessary to do it. I
Right.
just, there's all kinds of paradoxes in that.
Yeah, and I
That's
think it gets to your wholeness, and that
yeah.
is which I've been really fascinated recently by wholeness and holiness and how they kind of go together. But if you're a whole person, you're not so good at protecting that you're never going to get hurt. You can survive being hurt,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And isn't that's that paradox. It's like, oh
It
no, I'm
is.
not averse to pain, but it's not going to kill me.
That's right. That's
Suffering.
right.
Suffering is a word that is so interesting. Suffering, I believe, is necessary, redemptive, and purposeful. And yet, in the world, people are told, whatever you do, avoid suffering.
Oh my goodness.
And that robs us of development and growth and our ability to help others. In fact, it's in our suffering that we can help other people when they're suffering. A person who's never suffered, and this gets back to the crucifix, it's like, he suffered everything, and that I can now go, what I'm going through. And he's like, oh, there's nothing you could go through that I can't feel.
Yeah. We don't build trust by pretending to be whole. We build it by becoming whole, making an intentional investment in developing whole leaders and measuring a wild trust, a kind of trust between each other that is our deepest aspiration, that fulfills our wildest needs and expectations. That is at the core of this book, Whole Leaders, Wild Trust. This isn't a book about being perfect. It's about being real. It's about the courage it takes to show up, to lead not just with strategy, but with soul. Because in today's world, trust isn't a luxury, it's a requirement.
Pre-order your copy of Whole Leaders Wild Trust today. And for bulk book package deals, email us at contact@wildleaders.org for more information about ways to partner with Dr. McKenna to bring wild trust to your team, your organization, or your next keynote event.
There's a moment in John 21 where Jesus is in a conversation with Peter, who is one of his disciples. And if people don't know who Peter is, Peter was kind of brash. He kind of came forward with a lot of guts. He like spoke too soon with confidence and all that kind of stuff. And yet, organizationally, Jesus knew that he was going that the church as an organization was going to be built on the shoulders of Peter. And I don't know why this, like your comment before about the crucifix falling over, kind of makes me think of this, but is that there's a statement in there where he asks him 3 times, he says, "Do you love me?"
Oh,
And it's this moment where, and I talked about it in my first book, is this 3 questions down. Like it's weird to ask a person the same question 3 times, but as a person invested in Peter, Jesus is asking him over and over again, "Do you love me?" Because he's trying to, in my interpretation of that is he's trying to get to the root of it. And at the end, because after he asks him, like, "Do you really understand what I'm asking you? Because if you follow me, if we go here, this is what's going to happen." And it's described that he says, when you were young, you dressed yourself. And when you're older, you will reach out your arms and someone else will dress you. And most theologians think this is a reference
oh,
to Peter being crucified upside down.
yeah.
This is what the stakes are. And to bring this to a practical level, I think so often we don't talk to leaders about what the actual stakes are.
Oh gosh, I can't wait to talk about this. There's so many things you said there. First of all, look, going back to Peter, and I'm just growing in my knowledge of the Bible in a lot of ways. And one of the other things about those 3 things, they some people say he asked him 3 times because he denied him 3 times.
Yeah,
That was his way of forgiving him.
Maybe, yeah.
And I also heard that sometimes they asked him that Jesus asked him using different words for love me, like how deep is it? But I love that. I totally think that's fascinating. But this whole idea of the stakes of leadership, I wrote a book a few years back called The Motive.
Yeah.
Which was really the prequel to all my other books, because before we talk about how to be a leader, we should ask people, why do you want to be a leader in the first place? Because if your motive is self-oriented, you should never be a leader, because the economics of leadership, the personal economics, are terrible.
Yeah.
It's just like being a parent. It's like, if you want to be a parent because you think I'm going to get a lot out of this, it's a shocker to people, because you're like, there's a lot of suffering in parenting. Yes. And
Yeah.
you're going to do it anyway.
Yeah.
But when you become a leader because you think, and you've worked in high tech, a lot of these high tech leaders think, well, I'm going to be cool and I'm going to be famous. I'm going to be rich. I'm going to get to do whatever I want. I'll be fun. I'll be the center of attention. Well, that's the definition of somebody who's not going to be a good leader, because every time they have to do the really ugly stuff,
Yeah.
they're going to want to push it off on somebody else.
Yeah.
Being a leader is a selfless act. And I really do believe that it's saying, I want to suffer for others for their benefit. I think it's a really sacrificial act. And if you go into it knowing that, then when that happens, you can go, oh yeah, this is where I get to suffer for them.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
even me, who knows that in theory, there's many days where I'll go home and say to my wife, man, I don't think they appreciate this, and this kind of sucks.
Okay.
And it's like, yeah, you signed up for that, and be grateful for the suck.
Well, okay, so this is crazy. So my first book was titled Dying to Lead.
Oh,
And you get
how did we not know each other?
I know. Well, it was a long time ago, and I wish we had, because I was trying to get at this necessity for, like, you've got to want it and also be willing to die to it. Like, how do you walk into that paradox? And so I wrote a chapter that actually confused a lot of people, quite frankly. I think you'll understand completely. And I called it Reluctance to Lead. And what I made this, and I wrote about this in research papers, what I really believed we should be asking people when we interview them is, if I'm going to offer you this job, what would cause you to be reluctant to take it?
Ooh, I love that. I love that. Man, I don't want to steer our conversation into other things. I don't have a lot of self-control sometimes, and this is so much fun.
All right.
We talk about when you're interviewing people, you should scare them with sincerity.
Yeah, it's very
Say, like, our
right?
company really believes in this, and they're like, yeah, I want to work there. Okay, but just before we go there, if we're going to make you do this, are you going to be okay with that? In other words, and you're going to be a leader. So this is what's going to happen. This is what's going to happen. You're going to feel like this sometimes. Are you sure you want to do that? You probably don't want to do this, do you? That would be a service to people, to try to talk them out of it by scaring them around the reality.
Around the reality. And people were confused because they're like, I don't get it. I even included in the book as a competency that if someone can't answer the question of why they would be reluctant to take the job,
then they don't get the job.
They shouldn't have the job, right?
Yeah.
Like, but it never gets asked. It never gets asked. And one other thing, Pat, when you were talking about the 3 questions, I started using that the questioning process with leaders. And so I would ask, and I have one example I give where I would ask leaders, like, why do you lead? And so I asked a senior executive in aerospace. I thought, I'm going to try this out. And so I said, why do you lead? And she said, well, I lead because I believe in, this was way back. So she said,
Yeah.
she literally said, I believe in the 2025 vision, which is funny given where we are for our company. It's just, it was a lot of business speaking. It wasn't a lie. It wasn't a lie, but it was not very interesting. And so I said, I thought I'd try it. I said, why do you lead? And I could tell that when I asked it again, she either thought I wasn't listening or that I didn't hear her. But as I just let it be. And she said, after a few minutes of kind of pausing, she said, well, my husband and I, quite frankly, I got used to a new level of income and I started to get it promoted. And so I took the job. And so again, not a lie, but it wasn't really where I was hoping she might go. And so I let her go on. And then I said a third time, why do you lead? And she told this story, Pat, that I was like, it blew me away. She goes, well, the honest truth, and she's in aerospace, right? They build airplanes. And she said, when I was 9 years old, my sister and I climbed up on the roof of our house and we made wings out of cardboard. And I'm up on the roof, and my sister, before I was ready, she pushed me off the roof and I fell to the ground off of the second story of our house and I broke my arm. And she said, ever since then, I've wanted to help people fly.
Wow.
And I was like, and I immediately thought, I would follow you anywhere. Do you know what I mean? Like excavating that why.
I think it was the 2025 vision. I love that.
And so interesting.
You know what's funny? This is a less profound, but it's so interesting. We talk about in my book, The Ideal Team Player, where I talk about humble, hungry, and smart.
Yeah.
I said when you interview people for those things, use I call it the Law and Order school of interviewing. Law and Order. You remember that show, Law and Order?
Yeah.
They would ask a perp a question 3 times, and the third time did you kill her? No, I didn't kill her. Did you kill her? No, I didn't kill her. Did you kill her? Okay, I killed her. It's like somehow you ask somebody 3 times, and the third time they go, okay, I'm going to tell you the truth. And you did that.
It's just more true, right?
Yeah, because basically what you're saying is, gosh, and Jesus probably did this too. Do you really love me? And remember, Peter got kind of frustrated. It's like, yeah, Jesus, you know that I love you. But that's when he got passionate. But the first time it's easy. Of course I love you. Of course I love you.
Yeah.
You know, so I love that. It's like going deeper.
So if we can start to connect some of these dots, like I think there's so many pathways here.
Yeah.
I'd love to ask you about your work on Working Genius. And I told you this already, but our team added that assessment to our own developmental rhythm using our own developmental assessments. And it was so interesting just to add it to our rhythm because we practice what we preach. And so every organization we work with is using these 10 assessments in the toolkit to build trust and develop leader capacity. And we're like, oh my goodness, this is such a gift. So let's take this Working Genius assessment and let's add it to the rhythm. And so we had a powerful conversation, Pat, regarding this. I would love to know, you seem to be on a path in your own life, and you already mentioned this kind of this focusing on the individual that you've moved toward, and this tool is so powerful. Will you tell us a little bit about that path? What brought you to this?
I appreciate you asking that because, Working Genius, which is our newest thing, which was by accident, just over 5 years ago, I stumbled upon this in my own frustration. So it happened one day at work where it was like 3 months after COVID. We went back to work because we were a small company and it was in California. So it was like a year before they were going to open up in California, but we went back to work, but we were doing everything on Zoom. And I had this one day I had a Zoom call where I was presenting a bunch of leadership stuff. It happened to be to a bunch of priests. And I was really excited. I love teaching. And then I had to do another Zoom call with a group of people that were involved in that. And I needed to push them to do better. And then I had another meeting right after that where we were talking about coming up with a podcast. And I went from excited to bummed out to excited. And the woman next to me, Amy, said, why are you like that, Pat? And she wasn't being critical. She was curious, like, why do you go from up here to down here to up here? And of course I thought, I don't know what's wrong with me. I said, I want to figure this out. And purely out of a desire to figure out why I would come to work, always excited to be there, but I'd find myself getting really frustrated easily in
Huh.
different moments. So I said, I want to figure this out. And I realized it was when I was doing certain kinds of work. And it made me think, okay, well, what kind of work is there? Well, there's these 6 different activities in work. And a few of them I really don't like. And a few of them I really like. And I've never really thought, and I thought I was just trying to figure myself out. And then we were like, this is probably universal.
Yeah.
And then I had a whiteboard in my house. I was going through with my wife and my kids and people at work, and people were looking at the model and using it, and CEOs were like, oh my gosh, this explains me and my team. So we put together this assessment. And so that's where it came from, is me really trying to understand why I was mysteriously frustrated at a company that I loved the people there and I loved what we did. But in certain moments, I would get really grumpy and I didn't know why. And I finally figured it out.
That's so interesting. So a few years ago, and I think I know the answer to the question I have, but I'm not sure I do. I was having a conversation with Donald Miller, who wrote the book Blue Like
Yeah.
Jazz, and he said to me, he said, Rob, we were talking about writing, and he said something that I so resonated with. He said, I don't like writing. And this is an author, right? This is a book author, and he said, I don't like writing, but I love to have written things. And I was like, you just labeled me. One of the questions I
Interesting.
have that I saw in the assessment, I'm curious on your take on it though, is this space between being good at something and not necessarily loving it, but loving the product of it. You know,
Yes.
it's yeah.
Yeah. So this is very interesting. There's so many levels here, Rob. One is because the working genius, there's these 6 types of working genius.
Yeah.
The genius you have are the 2 that you get joy and energy from doing. That's the key here. You get joy and energy from doing. Burnout comes when we're not doing the kind of work that feeds us.
Mm,
But some people can get themselves to do things that they don't like, that don't give them joy and energy because the outcome is worth it for them.
yeah.
But the problem is if you put yourself in that position too much, you really get burnt out. Because
Yeah.
there needs to be enough reward in the process to keep you going. So in other words, if you like having written books, and so you're constantly getting yourself to write books, but the process isn't very good, you're going to start to resent that.
Mm,
So, but that doesn't mean you can't power through things. Now, though, here's an interesting thing. And this would be a good thing for you and Donald to think about. And that
yeah.
is, but if we're wounded enough, we can force ourselves to do things that we don't like,
Yeah.
because the outcome is actually addressing a wound we have, but that can only be sustained for a certain period of time. I mean, and literally sometimes it's 25 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the thing I didn't like doing at work, the thing that brought this to me, this whole model, and it wasn't even one of my what we call working frustrations, which is the least thing for me. It was right in the middle. It was what we call a working competency. It doesn't feed you, but it doesn't kill you either.
Yeah.
But it's called galvanizing. And
Yeah.
I didn't like pushing people to do things that they didn't want to do,
Mm,
which seems like the definition of leadership, right?
yeah.
So I would come to work and I want to work and exercise my 2 geniuses, which are called invention and discernment, which is coming up with new ideas and evaluating things. And every day people would go, you got to push, you got to push. You're going to push us? You're going to push us? Because nobody else could do it. So
Yeah.
I was getting sucked into an activity that I fundamentally didn't like. And it burnt me out. And over 20 years, I got to the point where I had like galvanizing PTSD, like, don't make me push anymore.
Yeah.
And yet I thought, well, to be a good leader, you have to do that. No. Every leader has different gifts. And be the kind of leader who uses your gifts and allows other people who have gifts that you don't to fill in your gaps. And that's one of the beautiful things about the working genius is you can finally stop feeling guilty about the stuff that crushes you and say, hey, I don't have to be good at stuff that crushes me. In fact, I can allow others to take some of that load off of mine without feeling like, oh, I'm not doing my job. Sometimes our guilt and frustration leads us to do the very things we hate because we think, oh, that's what a leader does. It's not the case.
Yeah. It's very interesting because, I even getting to know me quickly, you probably know this. I rated high on galvanizing and wonder. And
Ooh,
but it was what was what was also interesting in the deeper story is like back to that Donald Miller story about being good at writing. Like it's definitely in my skill set. I don't love the writing process, but I love and so like tenacity is it rated quite low, but I love to get things done, but I don't love the process of getting them done.
Right, right, right. You love
Does
to
that
have them done.
does that make sense? Like that's why the book,
Yes.
like I love to have written a book, but the process sometimes can be
Well,
a
and
little
you and
tricky.
I were talking earlier about using a publisher, and you know what a great thing about a publisher is? They give you a deadline, and they
Yeah,
tell you if you don't meet that deadline, there's consequences, which will stimulate your tenacity.
it's so true.
Some
So
people do not need a deadline. They're like, hey, I'm going to get it done 2 weeks early, whether somebody's waiting for it or not.
yeah. Okay, so I want to ask one more question about this, then I want to keep going a little deeper if we can. Um what is the relationship between understanding this space of joy and of genius and trust? In your mind, what is that?
Ooh,
What is that relationship?
oh, I love that question. See, you are a total wonderer. You ask deep and meaningful questions. That's what wonder is. And you know something,
Yeah.
I'll tell you, you go back to your childhood, Rob, and you were doing that as naturally, and now you were in an academic family and a faith family, but kids don't get encouraged to do that in academia. They're told like, just do
Yeah.
your work, do what I tell you to
Uh-huh.
do and finish it. And you're like, but I have all these questions.
Right. Right.
Like, great. Okay.
Yeah.
So trusting means trust is related to humility, I think.
Hmm.
And humility is knowing what is true, right? True and
Yeah.
trust and true. And that is, so what for you, it's like for you to be able to say to yourself, I am a wanderer. It is a gift God gave me. I ask questions. I ponder things. I can sit and really think about these things. And then I have galvanizing. Once we get to something, I love to get people going. I love to encourage them and motivate them and rally people. And that is true. It's a gift God gave me. I'm going to accept that. I'm going to trust that I can be enough doing those things. Now, the other thing I can trust is that I'm not good at those other things, and occasionally I'm going to have to do them, but I don't have to do those to prove that I'm worthwhile. Do you see what I'm
Yeah.
saying? But
Yeah.
if you don't trust that you have worth, you're going to think, well, I have to pick the things I don't like to prove that I'm good. And the things that I am good at, I'm just going to say, well, those are easy, so that's not enough.
Yeah. Yeah. It so closely relates to the way I define trust and is that is your belief, and I think it directly relates to what you just described, your belief in my ability. So in other words, will I be able to do what you're asking me to do? In
Yep.
my integrity, in other words, will I do it, and will I have your best interests in mind as I do that? In my reliability, so I'll do it consistently. The consistent story will be more consistently doing it than not. And then also in my strength. In other words, it's not just being able, but it's like I'll do it well, and if I can't, I'll get better at it or find help. And it's it's a lot of things that are a part of what trust is about. But then the most important part at the end is that I'll tell you the truth if any of those things are missing.
Exactly,
And
exactly,
and it's
exactly. Truth.
yes, and it's and
Truth and
back
trust are rooted in the same
well, and
word.
I think it relates to why understanding our working genius is so important is because when I talk to leaders about that definition, one thing I say is like, I mean, obviously, as you look at all these different things, integrity, ability, reliability, and strength, and then truth telling, is that it means that there's a lot of things I need to know about myself in order for me to enter into a relationship with you where I can even be honest. Like I have to
Yeah.
develop an awareness. And so one of the powers of this assessment is building that awareness so that you kind of know like, and it's not just, it's also like what brings you joy? Because we
Right.
may see that like those motivations aren't there. And I'm like, why isn't it happening?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. You know,
So
there's this thing called and there's so many thoughts. Okay, first of all, so I want to say this. I'm the worst marketer in the world, but we priced this at $25 because we want people to give it to their kid in middle
yeah,
school or in high
yeah,
school. We want
yeah,
everybody in a company to go, hey, well, our whole team can do this. And I have good friends that said, oh, you should have charged more and make it a corporate tool. And we're like, no, we want every human being to understand the God-given geniuses they have and the things they're terrible at or
yeah.
that deprive them. And we also it takes 12 minutes to take it. So we want people to go and take the 12 minutes to fill this out. The report is rich. You will go to your spouse and your colleagues and go, oh my gosh, this explains why I do so well in that and why this part of my job, or when I'm at home, my wife read the book and went through it and said, oh my gosh, I love it and I'm pissed. And I said, why?
Yeah.
Because I was mothering outside of my geniuses for 20 years and I felt guilty like I was a bad mom. And as it turned out, I'm just not good at some of the things there.
Mm-hmm.
So
Good.
it is such a relief, and it gives people a newfound sense of confidence and diminishes their guilt and shame where they're not meant to be feeling guilt and shame. So I really want people to do it. It takes 12 minutes. It costs $25, and we've had so many people that it's changed their marriage, it's changed their careers, the way they work with their team. So I'm really big on that.
Yeah,
Now,
that's awesome.
so I never do that. So I wanted to because you reminded me of that. But you said something at the end that what did you just say?
About that we have to know a lot of things about ourselves in order to be trusted.
Yes.
To be trustworthy.
And celebrating what we're not good at is a massive relief. And because when somebody comes to you and says, hey, you need to do this, we don't get to go, hey, sorry, that's not my working genius. But to go to them and go, hey, I will do my very best. You know, this isn't what I love to do. And I will try my very best. But I want you to know I'm not great at this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you can actually go do it and actually put yourself into it without feeling bad, like I have to prove myself.
Yeah.
Because I ask people at work sometimes, hey, you're going to have to do something here that I know you don't love it. And they're like, hey, as long as you know I don't love it and you're not expecting me to be as good as somebody who loves this.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know? Sometimes your player gets hurt and you go, you got to play a new position on the field. And they're like, what, do you expect me to be as good as? No, I would never expect you to be as good at because I know what you're best at. That actually takes the pressure off, and you can actually go do that for a short period of time, knowing that nobody's thinking you're supposed to be great. Anyway,
so good.
There's something liberating. I actually think about knowing what you don't love and what you weren't put on earth to do.
Yeah.
There's something so liberating about that.
So, Pat, one of the things in that definition I was sharing about, what trust looks like, and then this reality of we have to be able to tell each other the truth, which I think we've already made clear is difficult to do. It takes me back to the garden. It's so interesting when in the story of Adam and Eve, right? And it's like when they first committed that sin, and it's so funny too, because when you talk about wounds, there's also this other piece of that about us wounding others, right?
Yeah.
It's always a necessary part of that conversation. We're going to talk about brokenness. It's not just other people have built shame into us. It's like we've done that to other people, or we've wronged other people. We didn't just forget to take the garbage out. We did bad things and facing that. But in the garden, what was in that story, and when I started to get deeply into trust over the last few years, I thought about it, and then what did they do as soon as they made that wrong, when they did the bad thing, right? Is they hid. Yeah. Like even God comes looking for them and can't find, like, where are you? And so all of a sudden they realize that I've got something to be ashamed of, so I'm going to hide. And I think about this in organizations or families or friendships or whatever, is like this wounding we have done to other people, or the wounds we experience, they cause us to hide. And when we hide, it's the opposite of vulnerability. It's the opposite of transparency. So we actually take that clear window of seeing who we are and we just smudge it up. And I'm curious about your thoughts on that.
Yeah. I think when I interview people for humility and vulnerability, because they go together, really what I want to do is know, can they ask for and grant forgiveness? Can they say, hey, I'm really sorry, what I did there was wrong? Or if somebody else says that to them, can they forgive? Yeah. And I really look for that because without that sense of I can accept it and I can offer it. And this is one of those things we all have to realize, we hurt others. We do the wrong thing. I love when I watch sports and somebody goes, my bad, that was on me. I'm like, I love that person. I want to follow them. They become an athlete that I really like because they're not going like, hey, what did you do? Now, that doesn't mean you take responsibility for things that aren't yours. Yeah. But when it is yours and you say, no, that was my fault, Man, that's a huge thing. And sometimes people are just so wounded in life that they feel like, well, I'm not forgivable, so I'm going to pretend that I didn't do anything wrong. And that there's a very low ceiling on the trust that can be built in that relationship.
I used to say something I think you'll resonate with, but it actually kind of made some of my Catholic friends a little nervous because I would talk about what if we began building confessing cultures?
You know what's interesting? Confession. My wife is a convert to Catholicism. And by the way, I have so many evangelical friends and non-believing friends. I mean, I don't want
Yeah.
anybody watching this to think we love all people and
Yeah.
we share our faith because it's central
Yeah.
to who we are. But confession is the part of Catholicism that is most misunderstood. And my wife used to be like, what's the deal with confession? And she became Catholic and she went to confession and she came out in tears and she goes, oh my gosh, that was amazing. I feel like I've been, I can be forgiven. And people look at it as a condemning thing.
Yeah.
But it's actually a liberating thing. And yeah, the willingness to go to somebody, ask anybody who's finally gone to somebody and just said, I'm so sorry, it was my fault. And I just, and to ask for forgiveness and have it granted is one of the most beautiful things that we can experience in life.
It is, and it's so countercultural.
Oh,
It's so
totally.
countercultural, and the courage it takes to do that. I just lift up those people, and to what you said. So related to that, like this was one of the most shocking findings, I think. There were many shocking findings. So you've seen our State of Trust at Work report and some of our research, but I want to describe one part of that is that we have what's called the Wild Trust Quadrant, and
I love that.
We give people, organizations, a net trust score on how they're rating on different builders of trust. And one of the powers of that, like when we had Stephen Covey on, is that he said you can measure trust because if you can measure increasing speed and decreasing cost, so he was doing it from the outcome side. He said you can measure trust. And what was so powerful about that conversation is I said, Stephen, like I already told you this, I came from the other side where I wasn't even out to look at trust. I was out to build whole leader capacity and have people thinking about things like their competence and their call and sharing it with each other. And then trust was the outcome. So it was this triangulation. So what we did is we did this study where we looked at where organizations rated on this 2x2. And you can imagine on one axis is team trust, and on the other axis, personal trust, we separate that for a moment. On the other axis is organizational trust. So imagine team trust and organizational trust. And if you're high on both, we call that a stronghold. So if your organization, across the board is rating that way, and if your team trust is high, but your organizational trust is low, we call that islands of trust. So people are,
which is really rare. That's what amazes me is how rare that is.
Yes. And so that was one of the places where we found people were actually struggling the most, which comes back to what we were describing about trust being relational. And then on the other part, we had lots of organizations where there was high organizational trust. So trust in leaders, trust in the systems and the conditions, but lower team trust. And then we call that the shell of trust, like an egg. It's messy on the inside, but there's structure on the outside. And then the low category we call the jungle of trust. And here's why I tell you this, because I'm really curious about your take on this.
Yeah.
Is that we realized as we were debriefing this, our team was debriefing this with CEOs and their leadership teams, that a lot of them were trying, even in large organizations, trying to identify the individuals who may have brought their scores down. And I saw a CEO doing
that might hurt trust.
Yeah. And so I saw this CEO doing this whose organization had rated in the stronghold. So keep in mind, this is a business that's rating high. But he was still looking to see if, and he can't find it. It's big enough. He's not going to be able to find it anyway, but he's kind of trying to pinpoint who are the people who are even bringing our scores lower than the highest. And so we did a study, Pat, on what percentage of, when you look at organizations in the stronghold, what percentage of the individuals in those organizations are in the jungle? Do you hear me? And it was 41%.
Wait. In a stronghold organization.
41% of the individuals are in the jungle.
Explain to me how since it's organizational and team.
Right.
Are you saying that's still relatively low?
No, I'm saying what it caused me to think about that kind of blew me away. And first of all, that we also found that nearly half of all individuals are functioning in a jungle overall. So it's got it.
That's right. So Yeah.
But this was when the organization rates in the stronghold, what percentage of their individual employees are in the jungle? And it was 41%, which is why I always say that so often we assume that trust is a big word, but is ubiquitous. That
Oh, yeah.
if it's somewhere, it's everywhere. And it's not true.
Right.
It's like even in the
I
stronghold,
confirm
organizations
that.
that are doing well, the reality is that brokenness is there.
Oh, got it. Now I get it. Yes.
And I'm curious about your thoughts on that. Like this assumption that we're trying to be perfect when in fact, you know what I mean? The reality that a leader needs to deal with is you have people that are struggling.
Well, and I'll use this analogy from Snow White so that people don't think I'm talking about real people, but you know, you, sometimes to be a good company, you just have to be the tallest of the dwarves, you know? And what I mean by that is even great companies are really, really messy, and human beings are messy. Now, I'm guessing that you could have a small stronghold company where that number, that 41% might be 25%.
Yeah, for sure. But this was overall. Yeah.
But even 25% is shocker. You know what I mean? But
Right.
which goes to show you that we are imperfect, messy, broken people.
Yeah.
And 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 that even in great organizations, there's a lot of suffering going on.
Yeah.
And what's scary is to think about, what do you think that percentage is in the jungle organization? In the jungle organization, you might have 80% of the people
Yeah.
feeling like jungle people. So it's just crazy. And it doesn't surprise me. It does not surprise me. I think
Yeah.
that what we have to realize is dysfunction. This is why we wrote the book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. It's
Yeah.
selling as much now as it did 15 years ago,
Wow.
which is crazy. And it's because everybody goes, yes, my organization, my team is dysfunctional. And it's okay to say that. We want to figure it out. It's not like people are like, no, we're good, you know?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's why people, even the best marriages are messy.
Oh my goodness. You know what? My good friend of mine who was a voice in our wedding. We were married 28 years. And you know what he said at our wedding that kind of made everybody in this
You mean 28 years ago you were married?
28 years ago we were married. Yeah, we've been
Yeah,
married.
because you said we were married 28 years and it sounded like it ended.
No. We just celebrated 28 years. And he said at our wedding, he said, the vows you're about to say you cannot keep. And then he paused. And I had never heard this said in a wedding
I
wedding
love
before.
that.
And he said, and then he paused, and I can almost hear a pin drop like in this, where, you know, in the church where we were married. And then he said, it's only by the grace of God that you will be able to keep these vows. And it was like, I think to your point about how much grace and courage it takes to face the reality of brokenness within our aspiration for wholeness and redemption.
This is crazy. So right now, it's so fun to talk to being Catholic and non-Catholic people and even non-believers who get exposed to these things. So I'm in the middle of a novena, which is a 9-day prayer where I ask Saint Therese de Lisieux to pray for me, and I pray and I ask her to join me in prayer. She was the saint who died when she was 24 years old, and she was this tiny woman who got sick and died, but she was like one of the most powerful saints, and it was all about your brokenness. And just today somebody was telling me it's so powerful because she's all about recognizing that I am not strong, I am not perfect, I can't do this on my own, and I am going to fail, and I'm loved even in that.
Yeah.
And leaders, myself included, have to realize that. You can go into marriage and say, I want to be the best husband in the world. I thought that. I want to be the best parent in the world. I thought that. I want to be the best leader in the world. I thought that. I have screwed up in every one of those areas in some ways, and not small ways. I thank God, not in the massive worst ways. There was no kiss cam at a Coldplay concert, that kind of thing, you know. But we all make big mistakes.
Yeah.
And we hurt others. And if we go into anything thinking, I can do this on my own, we are setting ourselves up for huge shame.
Yeah.
We just can't. And if we think we can do it on our own, we probably will deny when we make a mistake and try to cover up for it or blame somebody else so we don't take it on ourselves. We just have to be able to say, my bad.
Yeah. Okay. So here's my last question. I kind of have two, and I want to ask them both. Let me ask the surfacey one first. Okay. I wrote this down. I was like, I wonder what Pat would say to the litmus test for readiness. And so if there was a litmus test, in business, we call this qualifying a lead, right? For whether or not you can help an organization, and we have our litmus test. I'm curious about what is the litmus test for whether or not you can help an organization?
Oh gosh, I love this. And it's really important because there's so many consultants out there that's like, but I want to help, I want to get a client. And we found, I wrote a book called, what was it called? I can't believe this. I'm blanking out on the term. Do I have it in here? Oh yeah, I did. I just saw it. It's called Getting Naked. Getting Naked.
Yeah.
And it's how we go about working with clients. And you have to be able to go in and lose a client.
Yeah.
If you're going to help somebody, you have to be able to lovingly push them in a way that if you realize their limitation, you got to say, hey, I don't think this can go any further. Not as a threat, but and so how do you know if you can help them? And what it comes down to is, are they willing to be vulnerable first about themselves?
Huh.
And because if they're not, then all you're going to be doing is trying to please them and avoid, and keeping that client might very well be hiding their defects from them.
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't mean you go in and charge in and you shove their defects in their face. You do it with kindness. But if a person doesn't really want to know the truth, it's like going to marriage counseling or any kind of counseling. It's like, if they're like, yeah, I'll do this, but don't make me admit that I have issues.
Yeah.
Well, a good therapist will never keep a client like that because you're just enabling.
Oh.
And so and when we work with clients, and now don't think we haven't got this wrong, and you really want to help them and you want to believe you can. And, I know that Sabbath has been a coach and a consultant too. And so when in doubt, give it a shot. But when you get to that point where you realize they cannot receive this, it's an act of love to say, I don't think we should do this.
One of the litmus tests for us that's so consistent with what you just said is,
oh, I'm glad.
We would say like, if the most senior leader in whatever part of that organization is not willing to participate, then we have to say no. It's like, and when like you said, we get it wrong sometimes, but we talk about like not just buy-in, because buy-in's like paying the money to participate. It's not, and we say it's not just about modeling, like it's not just about them role modeling vulnerability and awareness and all that, but most of the time, a lot of the work's going to be required in that person.
Right.
You know what I mean? So, which is all the things you just said. They're so true.
And maybe you can go in an organization, if that person has limitations in that, you can help them pick some low-hanging fruit and get them to a certain place. Maybe there is some benefit you can do, but you just have to know if they're not willing to do the work in them, there will be a point where you can't go any further.
Yeah.
But maybe there's good that can be done until you get there. So I don't want people to think it has to be perfect. But ultimately, you want to know that that person's willing to work on themselves. But not everybody is there right away. And sometimes doing the first part of it is what opens them up to doing that.
I think you and I both believe that a world that ignores both our genius and or our brokenness is a world without real trust.
Yeah.
And I would love to know, from your perspective, what does it truly look like to bring our whole selves into the complex work of leading and serving others?
Well, I'm going to say I want to be very realistic about this. There's certain work environments that don't lend themselves to that. And to do that might not be prudent.
Yeah.
And it's really incumbent. That's why, like you said this before about qualifying leads, in our work with all of our consultants, when we work with companies, we have to make the CEO has got to be the client. An HR person goes, hey, we're going to do this. And we're like, no, we need to talk to the CEO, because if the person at the top isn't interested in creating an environment where people can build trust and do all these things, then it's very limited. So I would say, don't go into an organization and go, I'm going to be vulnerable just to do it. Now, sometimes you have to take a little bit of a risk, but don't leave yourself open if the environment doesn't do it. If it's a jungle, don't go into the jungle and walk around in your underwear. You're going to get eaten by a tiger.
Right.
But if you're a leader, start building that trust at that level and then bring it down one level at a time so that the people deeper in the organization can go there too. So I would say, I hope I'm answering your question. It's like the ideal is to gradually get more and more trustworthy and open to that. but nobody expects somebody to go in and take an imprudent risk. That's really a bad idea.
Yeah, that is wisdom. You're bleeding right now, my friend. Pat, I'm so grateful for this conversation. I can't
How
even
much fun.
begin to tell you how much fun this is.
I feel like I've talked too much, but it's so fun to share and
No.
listen and to learn.
So good.
Yeah,
All
what a
right.
life-giving conversation that will continue. Absolutely. As we wrap this part up, Pat, we want our guests listening or watching to know what is the best way to connect with you and the work that you all are doing at the Table Group.
Yeah, so we do two podcasts. One is at the table with Patrick Lencioni. We love doing that. The Working Genius is it's totally integrated into our business, but we have a separate website where people buy the assessment, and we have a Working Genius podcast for people because there's so many people that have been certified in that. And so at workinggenius.com, that's where you can find all that stuff about the Working Genius.
Perfect.
All righty.
And we have one last wild question. Pat, are you in a season of accepting yourself or changing yourself?
Oh, accepting first. And then changing from a position of like willful choice, not from fear of being rejected.
Yeah.
Accepting first.
Well said.
Literally this morning, I had the conversation about this.
Wow.
Powerful.
Yeah.
Thank you, Pat.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sabbath. Rob, thank you. So
Thanks.
great to meet you guys and to do this. I can't wait this will not be the last time we work together.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for listening to this Wild Conversation podcast. For more information, visit wildleaders.org, click on the Wild Trust platform, and get started with the Wild Trust Index today.